in Burkina Faso, there are reports that 200 soldiers have been killed in attacks by an Al-Qaeda affiliate.
Breaking news out of Burkina Faso. Captain Ibrahim Traoré is under extreme attack as reports flood in of heavily armed men storming the capital city. Explosions, gunfire, and panic have gripped the streets, with eyewitnesses describing a scene straight out of a war zone. Is this the long-feared coup in motion? Who's behind the assault? Foreign mercenaries, internal traitors, or a coordinated strike to remove Traoré from power? As the self-proclaimed defender of African sovereignty, Traoré's enemies are powerful, and they may have just made their move.
But nothing like what happened in Djibo. There were no warning signs, no buildup, no known disputes in the days before. The strike came like lightning, not just swift, but architectural. That's the word analysts are whispering behind closed doors.
Stay with us as we break down everything we know about this surprise offensive, who's pulling the strings, and whether Traoré can survive one of the most dangerous nights of his presidency. City erupts in chaos. Armed men flood the streets. It began with the distant echo of gunfire, sharp, unsettling cracks that rolled through the dry air like thunder across the savannah. At first, no one could tell where it came from, but within minutes, Bobo-Dioulasso was no longer a city at peace. It had transformed into a battlefield. Armed men, their faces hidden behind black masks and their weapons gleaming under the harsh sun, stormed in from every major road. From the western border near Orodara to the bustling market center of Diolasoba, they arrived with fury and precision. Shops shuttered in panic, school children scattered across alleyways, their cries echoing between crumbling walls. Families dove for shelter, barricading doors with furniture and fear. Pickup trucks skidded across the red soil, their beds bristling with assault rifles and shouting gunmen. They didn't issue demands or warnings. There were no leaflets, no manifestos, only the cold, unflinching language of violence. Traoré's name whispered through the chaos like a curse or a prayer. Some claimed he had warned them, others believed he had betrayed them. Men in camouflage, barely distinguishable from the armed invaders, kicked down doors and dragged residents into the street. Vehicles were set ablaze, sending thick black smoke curling into the already darkening sky. The usual rhythm of the city, children playing, radios buzzing with music, traders haggling, was replaced by the howl of sirens, gunfire, and screams. The army was slow to react, caught flat-footed and under-resourced. As they scrambled to mount a defense, the militants entrenched themselves. They took up sniper positions atop buildings, erected makeshift checkpoints, and claimed entire neighborhoods in hours. Bobo-Dioulasso, once vibrant and alive, had fallen into shadow. The silence between gunshots was more terrifying than the violence itself.
The strike came like lightning, not just swift, but architectural. That's the word analysts are whispering behind closed doors. Because what unfolded in Djibo wasn't messy or improvised. It looked like it was built, piece by piece, with a clear purpose. Not just to kill, but to communicate.
President Traoré's position compromised. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the military leader turned president of Burkina Faso, found his command center compromised within hours of the first shots. Communications fell silent. Intelligence channels, once buzzing with activity, were jammed or cut entirely. At Kosiam Palace, the heart of power in Ouagadougou, the presidential guard stood tense, rifles in hand, eyes scanning the horizon. They didn't know whether they were holding the line or waiting to fall. The distinction blurred with each passing hour. This wasn't a spontaneous uprising or a ragtag group of rebels fueled by desperation. No, these men were trained, disciplined, methodical, and ruthless. Their coordination was surgical. They moved with precision, targeting infrastructure first. Communications towers crumbled, plunging entire regions into an information blackout.
Then came the precision of the strike. The attackers didn't just hit the base. They targeted the police station, the local prison, the hospital, and the market, each in rapid succession.
Military outposts were hit next, some overrun in minutes, others silenced without a shot. Then came the most calculated blow, the homes of Traoré's closest allies. Advisors, ministers, loyalists, gone or captured. This wasn't just about toppling a government. It felt deeply personal, a message sent not just to Traoré, but to anyone who believed in his promises. He had risen on the back of military might and patriotic vows. He had sworn to restore dignity, to bring safety to a nation battered by years of insurgency. He told the people the Sahel would rise under his watch. But now, the very ground beneath him felt uncertain, shifting, cracking like dry earth under strain. In the capital and across the country, people peered toward the skies, hoping to see helicopters, to hear the thrum of reinforcements. But the skies remained eerily quiet. In their silence grew a terrible doubt. Perhaps no help was coming, and perhaps for Traore, the reckoning had arrived not from afar, but from within. Market women and youth fight back. In a twist no one anticipated, resistance didn't start with the army, it ignited in the markets. Women who had, just that morning, been selling okra, tomatoes, and fufu transformed into warriors. With fury in their eyes and machetes in hand, they stood their ground. Some hurled stones, others rolled flaming barrels into the streets, creating makeshift barricades to block advancing militants and slow their momentum. The youth followed. Young men, once street footballers dodging potholes and playing barefoot, now wielded kitchen knives, broken glass, rusted tools, anything sharp. They knew these neighborhoods by heart. From the alleyways of Lafiabougou to the twisting backstreets of Tunuma, they launched ambushes and struck from the shadows. "This is our land," one shouted, face streaked with dust, eyes blazing with defiance. "We are not cowards." Though they lacked guns, training, and armor, what they had could not be measured in firepower. It was resolve, pride, a deep-rooted refusal to bow. As the attackers pushed further into the city, they were met not only by scattered gunfire, but by a people unyielding. Bullets tore through the air, but louder still was the roar of a population determined not to be conquered.
These aren't independent actors. They're weapons rented by invisible clients. Here's how the game works. These groups don't control territory for long. They don't build governance. They don't declare policy. What they do, repeatedly, is strike critical points in the state's nervous system.
Military confusion, friend or foe. Inside the barracks, chaos reigned, not from cowardice, but confusion. Soldiers gripped their rifles, eyes darting between shadows and uniforms. Some of the attackers wore the same fatigues. Some drove army-issued vehicles. Were they defectors? Traitors? Former comrades turned against them? Trust frayed quickly. Whispers of betrayal slithered through the ranks like smoke. "One of our own opened the gates," someone muttered. Another claimed to recognize a familiar voice crackling through intercepted rebel transmissions. In the dim glow of the Situation Room, Traore's inner circle argued heatedly. Should they call on allies? Mali? Guinea? But inviting foreign troops threatened their sovereignty. The clock was ticking. Outside, the rebels seized more ground. Then came the breaking point. Rebel broadcasts blared from hijacked radio stations, echoing through the streets. Traore's rule is finished. It wasn't just an attack anymore. It was a psychological siege. And inside Koshiam, doubt was as dangerous as any bullet.
You're not looking at an accident. You're looking at an operation. And in Burkina Faso, that operation has a name: regime recalibration. The question is, who's next on the list? Is it Traore? When surrounded, most leaders either fold or freeze.
Burkina Faso's rural resilience. Word spread like wildfire. From Gawa in the southwest to Ouahigouya in the north, the entire nation trembled on the edge of crisis. Neighboring cities snapped into high alert, radios crackling with unconfirmed reports and frantic updates. Border towns began bracing for the inevitable surge of refugees. In rural villages, elders summoned emergency councils beneath ancient baobab trees, banging carved sticks against stone to gather their people. In Kaya, a stronghold of support for Traore's Pan-African, anti-French rhetoric, the mood was conflicted. The city had cheered him once, proud to see one of their own speak boldly. But now, the elders sat in circles debating. "He is our son," a griot said solemnly, "but if his enemies come here, we will not die for politics. We will die for our homes." The message was clear. Loyalty to the land came before loyalty to any leader. In Dori and Djibo, towns long hardened by insurgency, there was no time for talk. The people there had lived under siege before. They knew the sound of distant gunfire and the meaning of silence at dusk. Volunteer militias, many no more than farmers and hunters, quietly cleaned their rusted rifles, checked ammunition, and readied their charms. At dawn, they would march, not out of obligation, but survival. "Let them know," a hunter said, lifting his musket toward the sunrise, "that the bush has warriors too." Across Burkina Faso, the lines were being drawn, not by politics, by pride, by people, and by the will to endure. This attack didn't come from nowhere. Those who had eyes behind curtains whispered of foreign fingerprints, of drones spotted overhead days before the assault, of intercepted messages in foreign tongues. Traoré had kicked out the French. He had aligned with new partners, new directions. Some said he turned too fast, made enemies too wide. A nation rich in gold and uranium doesn't shake free without rattling cages far beyond its borders. So, who funded these attackers? Who trained them? Some bore weapons not locally made. Others had satellite radios not even the army possessed. Traoré's fight wasn't just on the ground, it was geopolitical. Caught between old empires and new powers, Burkina Faso had become a chessboard, and Traoré was the king now under check.
But Captain Ibrahim Traoré is doing something unexpected. He's building, not just barricades or bunkers, but an entirely new state model, forged under pressure, designed to survive in the absence of international approval.
Remembering Sankara, as Bobo burned, voices from the north went unheard. These were the regions already weary from years of jihadist attacks, villages reduced to ashes, children born into camps, women still mourning husbands taken by war. Now, with Traoré under attack, hope flickered again, not out of loyalty, but desperation. They didn't care for politics, they wanted peace. But even they knew, if Traoré falls, the chaos might consume them too. In Gorom Gorom, a village elder told his son, "Prepare the donkeys. If the fighting reaches us again, we flee south." It wasn't fear, it was experience. They had lived through too much. They knew what came after governments fell: hunger, fire, and silence. But not all was grim. Across radios, in WhatsApp groups, on dusty chalkboards in rural classrooms, one name echoed louder than bullets: Thomas Sankara. The people remembered the fiery revolutionary, the man who walked barefoot and spoke truth with thunder. Traoré had styled himself in Sankara's image, and now, as cities burned and attackers advanced, many looked inward and asked, what would Sankara have done?
Thomas Sankara, who came to power in a coup in 1983, sometimes referred to as the African Sheh, was facing a rising challenge in the country because of his uncompromising choices.
The youth, angry yet proud, painted murals on broken walls. Patrie ou la mort, they scrawled, homeland or death. The spirit of resistance was not just physical, it was ideological. A belief that Burkina Faso could be more than a battlefield, more than a pawn. Voices of resilience, the people of Burkina Faso stand strong. As dusk fell over the city, the gunfire waned, not from peace, but from preparation. Both sides regrouped. Traoré's elite forces, rumored to have retreated to fortified bunkers, began plotting a counterattack. Drones, if still under control, began scouring rooftops. But the rebels had already embedded themselves. They had food, ammo, local collaborators. Some even claimed allegiance to powerful warlords from across the border. This was no raid. This was a siege. The question now wasn't if Traoré would survive. It was how long he could hold. And what kind of country would remain after the smoke cleared. Through it all, the ordinary people bore the weight. A mother in Dafra begged soldiers to let her fetch water. A boy in Tondogoso carried his injured father in a wheelbarrow past checkpoints. Children cried for bread. And still, the people endured. They chanted prayers. They sang old war songs. Some even joked through tears, because in Africa, even tragedy cannot break the soul. Whether Traoré stands or falls, one thing is clear: the people of Burkina Faso are stronger than any bullet. And though the attackers may occupy streets, they will never own the spirit that dances in the dust, that breathes through drumbeats and refuses to die. The attack on Traoré isn't just a threat to one leader. It's a strike at the heart of a rising African resistance. From military gunfire in Ouagadougou to whispers of foreign influence behind the chaos, this is more than politics. This is a power struggle that could shape the future of the continent. Will Traoré stand strong or fall like so many before him? And if he falls, who replaces him? Like, comment, and subscribe as this developing story unfolds, because the battle for Burkina Faso might just spark a wider revolution across Africa.